I'm pleased to have Denzel Washington here at this table for the very first time.
Thank you.
Great to have you here.
Nice to be here.
When you look at this montage of all that work, tell me what you think.
You know, I don't look at. I'm reminded of the experiences, you know, that I had making those films. So it's interesting to see them one against the other. I don't get to see them like that.
Yeah. Acting is mysterious, you've said. You know, it's not something that you can necessarily explain, necessarily sort of, you know, put together in an equation.
Yeah, people have different philosophies. For some, it's not mysterious. It's very technical, and you can do this and that and this and that, and you should get a certain result. I was sort of trained that way, but, you know, I think you got to bring something to the table. I think it's mysterious. It ought to be mysterious in terms of how you get to whatever it is you get to in a scene. I don't really like to talk too much about it, unless I'm talking to other actors about it.
Well, bear with me then on this one, because this is an interesting story, because I don't know how many times before, here you're playing somebody in Hurricane who not only is well known, but he's at the other end of a telephone if you want to. You can talk to him about what it felt like to be, to do, to think.
Yeah, and you know, he is well known to those of our generation and above. You know, you ask me, any 20-year-old does not know who Ruben is. Hopefully they do now. And yes, I could get him on the phone, and I didn't do much of that because you know, it's like I told him, I said, I'm not trying to imitate you. You know, he's 5'8", 160. I'm 6'1", 215 today, and so I can't be him.
Lost some of that tone.
Yeah, it lost some of that tone. It's gone. What was once north has gone south again. He was real easy about that. I mean, he wasn't hovering and around the set and, you know, no, I wouldn't walk like that or talk like that. He stayed away.
Yeah, but Jewison said, I mean, you had it. You had it that not only that the physical thing, you're a director who wanted to do this for a long time, said you had it, that you watched in the way you walked, the way you moved your head. Not that you intended to do that, but you had soaked it up. Not only that, the sense of, you know, you almost could see his spirit.
Right. Well, that's
in you.
Now you got it. You know, that's what I said to him. I'm trying to capture the spirit of the man. So I tried to get in touch with the spirit of him, or at least, you know, listen to him and talk to him and understand him and see what he's been through and see how I can connect that with my spirit. And then, obviously, there's a lot of technical things you do, you know.
Yeah. But you do talk to people. I mean, every time I read about you making a film, when you made A Bone Collector, you talked to Chris Reeve,
yeah?
Understand.
Yeah. I talked to dozens. Steve McDonald, you know, the case of the young cop who was shot here in Central Park. I went to visit him, and I met, you know, all kinds of people, just gymnasts, construction worker, you know, just to get a sense. First thing I learned, first guy I met, I walk in like, oh, I'm here with a sick person. You know, you don't know how to act. And he's like, hey, Denzel, loosen up. You know, you don't see me upset, don't you? No point in you being
if
upset.
Anybody's got a right to be upset.
If anybody's got a right to be upset, it's him. So I learned a lot from that. I said, oh, okay, you know.
It's a mindset, too.
Yeah, people look at you a certain way when you're infirmed, and they, you know, you know.
Everybody says, I mean, the worst thing it is of having something, being quadriplegic or having an illness that threatens your life, is that everybody doesn't know how to be natural around you. They forget to treat you naturally.
By the time I met Chris Reeves, and he was one of the last people I met, and I took Queen Latifah with me, and she hadn't met anyone or worked with. She was going to actually work with him. He was going to allow her to do stretch her and all this, stretch him and all this stuff. He and we were like talking about movies.
Yeah, he wants to direct.
Yeah, and I mean, and I had become so comfortable and been around so many quads, and I didn't need to ask the basic questions. I was more like, well, what are you going to be doing next? And, you know.
Yeah, and so, but you still could see part of your brain is saying, how does he move? How does he talk?
And doing certain things. Like when I walk in the room, I knew to get in front of him so he can see me. Yeah. Don't sit on the side, way over on the side. Make sure that you're within his range.
Yeah. And when you did Philadelphia, you talked to then not well-known Johnny
Cochran.
Carl
Douglas. Yeah, who would have known?
Douglas said an amazing thing to you, I read somewhere, which is if in fact you the witness is favorable to you.
That's right.
Stand over next to the jury.
Right, that's
Let
right.
that jury see his eyes.
That's right.
You know?
If he's unfavorable, go to the far side of the room. Take him away from the jury.
Those lawyers.
Yep.
Yeah. Take this role. I mean, you get a call. Jewison, did you sign on early, or what happened?
John Ketchum, who was one of the producers of the film, and I think had the rights to one of the books initially, to the 16th round. He came to my office in about 1991, 92. I read the book, and I read Lazarus in the Hurricane, and I went up to Toronto, and I met Ruben, and I met his Canadian friends, and I was trying to convince them to let me get the rights or share the rights with them and produce this film. Other people were involved looking for the same thing, one of which was Army Bernstein, who Beacon Entertainment ended up getting the rights to it and producing it.
But don't you have a certain leverage there? I mean, can't you say, you want Denzel, Denzel's your partner?
Well, they wanted to write a script themselves first, and Army gave them that opportunity to do that. I didn't think it was such a good idea for them to do it. I want to be in the NBA too, but you know,
That's right.
so
somehow that didn't happen.
and I think they actually made the right choice because he's a seasoned producer and I wasn't.
Yeah.
You know, so 3 years ago, 2.5, 3 years ago, when he and whoever came up with a script, they presented that script to me, Dan Gordon's script.
And you said, okay,
I said, okay,
let's go.
Let's go.
So what do you do then? You've signed on, and at some point, Norman Jewison is saying, Denzel, there's no way this camera can lie. You're going to get your butt up in the ring.
Right.
We're
well, I knew that. He said that, but I knew that. I mean, and I came on the film before he did, actually. Yeah. He was hovering.
Yeah.
I was a part of the decision-making team, if you will. I mean, I
don't want anybody that you can't work with.
Yeah, and I don't want anybody I can't work with.
Good for that
Yeah,
side.
but he and I had worked together before. Needless to say, he's a great filmmaker. But he did say that, and when he said it, and the way he said it, I was like, I think he just challenged me here, you know. And I think there was a couple other people around too. But I knew I had to get in shape. You can't. I mean, I think what he said was that, look, there's no magic in it, no special effects we can do. You're up there in your shorts.
Either that, or we lose the authenticity of the film.
And the film opens with the boxing, so it's got to be right.
But 9 hours every day?
Not every day. I did 9 hours for maybe about 6, 7 weeks prior to the boxing scenes. I trained for 1.5 years, but we ratcheted it up a notch, about 8, 9 weeks out from shooting the scenes.
When you do that, did you feel so good that you said,
I could just keep going. I was in the gym all day.
I mean, was
run
it
6 miles, go eat.
Intoxicating?
Yeah, you run 6 miles, you go eat, you train for 2 hours, you lift for an hour, and then we would do choreography for 4 hours. And I would stay in the ring, because we choreographed every punch, What we did was, all the body shots were real, because Terry Claiborne, who was my trainer, he and I used to spar all the time. And eventually we started just sparring to the body because we were getting headaches. And, it's like, why am I getting hit in the head? What am I doing?
Exactly.
I'm competitive, though. I was going at it. I was looking to hurt somebody, and not get hurt. But it didn't make sense because I found myself forgetting things. A famous boxer, Michael Spinks, I said, Michael, I'm getting these headaches. And, he says, oh, yeah, you'll get that, but, you'll get used to it and it'll go away. I'm like,
no, I don't think so.
I don't want to get used to it. And I sure don't want it to go. I want it to go away, but I don't want to get used to it.
That's a difference. That's right. Tommy Hitman Hearns once said to me, the thing I never knew about boxing is that the punch is like that.
Yeah,
they
you got to turn them over.
You got to turn it over.
And you learn to pop. You see how my shoulder's popping now?
Yeah.
You learn to pop that shoulder and really bend into it, and you got to turn it over, It's a great sport. It's a science.
Did you love it before you started this thing?
I loved it as a spectator.
But you ratcheted up.
Oh, man, I loved it. I enjoyed it.
You're to read about you. I mean, you're a guy who's curious about everything.
Right.
You're curious about this cup and this table and this water and the food you eat,
Yeah.
Well,
what's wrong with that? That's a good thing.
That's good. That's a good
thing.
thing. But my point is that you would, it would seem to me that would serve him. You always, you have an insatiable appetite to know more. And doing what you do, man, that's like, there's no better profession.
It's a natural.
Other than being a journalist.
And I studied journalism.
And that's where you were before.
I used to enjoy, I remember as I thought back on it, I used to enjoy world history.
Yeah.
I used to enjoy research projects, I always did well in history and social sciences, you know, because you had to go explore and do your homework, and then you'd write your paper. And I segued from that, and I started off in biology in college because I thought, oh, okay, I don't know what I'm going to be. I'll be a doctor. Right. I tried biology, and
you didn't like frogs.
No, I didn't mind the frogs. I just remember the teacher sitting there, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, what is he talking about? I'm not going to make it. I'm not even going to stay awake. But I eventually segued into journalism. I went from biology to political science. Then I started taking some journalism courses.
And then theater.
And then theater.
Why theater?
I covered a city council meeting once.
A little boring, wasn't it?
Ooh, boy. I covered a city council meeting. It was a little boring. So I actually took a class. I was uptown at Fordham, and I took a class just as an elective. And it was I forgot what they even called it, some kind of acting or speech and acting class. And I kind of enjoyed it. I said, oh, it's kind of fun. Yeah. And that summer, I went to work. I had done a lot of work in the Boys and Girls Club, and also in the Y. So I went to a sleepaway camp to work as a counselor up at Camp Sloan, Lakeville, Connecticut. And the counselors put on a show for the campers. Yeah. So I did a thing for my group, my tent that I was in charge of, my cabin. And I remember one of the counselors saying, you know, you got a real knack, you know, for this acting thing. You seem to be like real natural on stage. So I decided, I didn't know what I wanted to do anyway, so I decided to change campuses. From the Rose Hill campus at Fordham, I transferred down to Lincoln Center where they had a theater program. And I started taking classes and auditioning for plays.
And then after Fordham, went to San Francisco? Or?
American Conservatory Theater, yeah, San Francisco.
And first break was Soldier's Story? Or?
No, actually, Carbon Copy.
Oh, that's right.
No, first break actually was Wilma, the story of Wilma Rudolph.
Where you met?
Where I met Paulette, I met my wife.
And then?
I did that. The summer that I graduated, I did that in summer of '77. And then that fall, I went to ACT. I was there until the following spring. I just did 1 year there. I came down to L.A., found out without a car, you're a second-class citizen. Rode the buses, and I worked actually as an acting teacher in a little school, International Children's School. And I decided I got to go back to New York, regroup, get back into theater, which is what I wanted to do. So I came back here and did a lot of plays in the public.
Yeah, you did something with Joe
in the Park. Yeah, a bunch of stuff with Joe, and went on the road, regional theater.
Yeah. Have you been working pretty much since then? I mean, there have been no
pretty
big lulls.
You know what? The longest time I think I've taken off has been last year. I took off for 8 months.
But that was because you wanted to.
Because I wanted to, yeah. But I had a real momentum going from college on through all these roles and plays that I just mentioned, right up until doing Carbon Copy in 1980, 81, and I didn't get any work for about 6 months. And I thought, well, okay, wait a minute. There's always work at the post office. You know?
Yeah, all right,
go
back to biology.
I better go back down to the city council meeting. But I got a small play, a one-act play about two guys, one named Malcolm and the other named Elijah. I was even saying Elijah. When I first read it, I'm like, oh, this Elijah guy. I'm looking at him, I'm like, yeah, it's Malcolm. All right, it's a good part, big role. And that really jump-started my career again because the play went over very well. We did it down at the New Federal Theater, Henry Street Settlement. And that I went right from that play to a Soldier's play off Broadway, and right from a Soldier's play to St. Elsewhere.
When you look at it, I mean, just think, I mentioned all those directors. Sidney Lumet, Power. 3 with Spike.
Mm-hmm. Richard Attenborough.
Attenborough for Cry Freedom. Was it Cry Freedom?
Cry Freedom.
Cry Freedom. How many have you done with, what's his name, who did...
Ed Zwick.
Ed Zwick. 3
Ed Zwick.
Siege.
3, yeah. Courage Under Fire and Glory.
And Glory. That's
2 with Norman.
That's 2 directors, 6. 2 with Norman now. That's 8.
Mm-hmm.
Alan Pakula. Pelican.
Right. Jonathan Demme. Worked with some wonderful directors. Philip Noyes.
Yeah, Philip Noyes for Bone Collector. Yeah. Philip Noyes says that, I mean, it's amazing when you think about what you've done, that whole range of things, but from a guy who's a quadriplegic, you know, who's using his mouth to move a monitor.
To a boxer.
One eye to a boxer.
Can't beat that. That's an actor's dream.
Yeah. That's
got to be an actor's dream. I mean, you know, what could be better? A greater challenge. And really they overlapped in that I was working on The Bone Collector and still training for Hurricane. So what I would do was not do any strengthening exercises, no push-ups, no sit-ups, nothing that was going to build muscle.
Yeah.
So that I would be a little thinner for The Bone Collector, and I would never work out before I went to work. I didn't want to feel athletic. I would shoot all day on The Bone Collector and then work out in the evening. The only thing I would do was run on the treadmill and shadow box, you know.
Of any of these, is one character closer to your soul than any other? To who you are, to how you see the world, to
I think all these characters have helped to shape how I see the world. These films, yeah, in some way, have helped to shape how I see the world. I was definitely, I've been motivated, or more highly motivated, if you will, to do certain ones, maybe because that's a part of who I am.
Interracial relationships. Have you shied away from them at all? In film?
No, but I haven't gone out of my way looking for them, because it ends up only being about that. If it could be about more than that, to make a movie about an interracial relationship has already been done. To make a love story with people of different races is different, but anytime you do that, it becomes the issue of an interracial relationship, and that's more of an argument and opinion than a movie, you know, an issue than a movie. So I haven't really gone out of my way looking for that. I don't.
What do you look for?
I don't really look for anything, to tell you the truth, Charlie. I don't.
I mean, there's nothing. I mean, there's no. I mean, we saw Shakespeare there with Branagh.
Always like to do Shakespeare.
Yeah.
I would look for Shakespeare if I were looking for something.
Because, you know, what? Because, and beyond the fact that it's the world's greatest, it's the language.
It's the language.
To be able to
it's the
speak.
challenge. It's open to so many interpretations. It's fun. If they're making a movie, they're probably shooting it in Europe somewhere, so it's a vacation, you know. But it's just the ultimate. I had the opportunity to play Richard III out here in the park a few years ago, and I would love the opportunity to do that again. Yeah, I did Othello in college, but I don't know if I want to do that again. But maybe one day I might.
And Lear one day when you're really
maybe
older.
When I get in another couple of years.
Well, yeah. I mean, my point, I guess, is that have you come to a point where there is no ceiling for you? Really? I mean, there's nothing you can't do.
I don't think there's.
I mean, color is not a ceiling.
For anyone.
There's no ceiling because I mean, you've proven that you can cover the whole waterfront in terms of kinds of characters, whether it's a boxer or a quadriplegic or someone who's a brilliant lawyer, the whole range of stuff, right?
You know, with the training that I had, that's the way we were trained, you know, to play any part. There's no such thing as you can't play a part. You may not be right for a particular part. Yeah. But I don't think there's a part I can't attempt to play. I could at least analyze and try to break down and put a performance together. It may not be any good. Yeah. But I was taught, one of the things that I was taught that sticks in my mind was a gentleman by the name of Bill Ball, who was the artistic director of the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco. And he always talked about failing big. He said, if you're going to fail, fail big. And I'm like, I like that philosophy.
I do too. I do too.
You know, I'm not a fall back mentality kind of person. People would say, well, you know, you better have another career to fall back on. I'm like, I don't want to fall back on anything. If I fall, I want to fall forward. I want to see what I'm hitting.
Or if I, exactly right.
You know what I mean? I don't want to. I never understood that mentality.
I didn't either.
I never understood it. I'm like, I'm going that way. I don't know.
I mean, if you're worried about being safe and secure, and if security, if security is your byword, then you know you're never going to reach out and do anything. I don't think that's going to protect you.
That's right.
You know, it's going to give you any kind of genuine satisfaction. Right. You know, if you're worried about that, then you know it's. In other words, if you're a sailor, you would never leave port. If you only care about security.
There was an IQ question. I think it was an IQ question where they had 9 dots. Yeah. And you had to connect the dots, I think, with 5 lines without lifting the pencil. The only way you could do it was to go outside the box. Yeah. You know, and people sit there within it and go, oh, man, you can't do it. Well, you can't. Nobody said you can't go outside the box.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and the most, I mean, if you look at most areas of life, I mean, the people who've really done things have gone outside the box,
Right.
you know, and have been, you know, who have not taken the beaten path. You know, it's a little bit like Frost and The Road Not Taken.
They're all big.
Yeah. Drama and comedy, which is harder for you?
Comedy.
Is it harder?
Oh yeah. Well, it's more fun, but it's newer territory, you know, for me. I've done a couple of 3 of them, and not very good, but I went for it. But I think comedy is more difficult because I mean, in life people tell me I got a good sense of humor, but that's different than doing comedy, because you got to do it again and hit it at the right. I can do it when it's spontaneous. Yeah. You know, but to hit it the right way, to know how to play, I think you really got to work at that. And I think that's probably an area where, by not getting back on stage enough and practicing, that I'm lacking a little bit, because you know, to jump in a movie now is a big business decision. You know, there's money on the line and all of those things. But to take up a small play and go off Broadway somewhere and practice, if you will, in a comedy, that's something I think.
Can you afford to do that in terms? I mean, can you, in a sense, if you go off and take that amount of time, when you think about responsibility to family, when you think about
I could do it. I could do it. I would have to do it in
LA. You wouldn't worry about hurting your market value, any of that stuff?
No. Shoot. If I'd worried about my market value, I would have done half as many films as I've done. You know, I like to work, and I'm about the work. It is called show business, and I understand business. I'm not a dummy. But I like to work, and I like to go in different directions. You know, I like to go up, and then I think after Malcolm X, I did Much Ado About Nothing. Yeah. I like that.
Was that your idea or Brano's idea?
Well, no, he called me.
Yeah.
It was his idea, but it was when he said it, and it wasn't a great or big part, I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted.
But since you hit, have you sought out roles badly? I mean, have you said to some director, call him up, said, I hear you bought the rights to, I would like to play that part. That's something I want to do. I'm your guy. No, never.
The closest to that maybe was meeting with Jonathan Demme on Philadelphia, you know, because it was a different idea. I think one that my agent approached him with.
That was a Lawyer Without Race, right? I mean, that was no.
Well, yeah. I mean, the fact that it was black, he wasn't. It didn't have anything to do with it.
It wasn't written as a black character.
No, it wasn't written as a black character.
Just written as a lawyer.
I think they were talking about. I could be wrong. Bill Murray or somebody. Or Robin Williams, I think it was, somebody like that.
Yeah. Directing. You want to do it. You're planning to do it.
We got the go-ahead now from Fox Searchlight. We're starting to spend money. And
that'll get their attention.
Yeah, starting to spend money. We hired a line producer and casting director, and you know, we're on track, if all things work together, to shoot this fall.
What's the story?
It's a true story.
In Harm's Way, is it?
No. In Harm's Way was a video idea.
Oh, that's right. That was a video. I forgot about that. Yeah, that was you directed that.
Yeah. That's why I just took a weekend and played around with the camera, and fortunately, this B.B. Winans allowed me to do that. Yeah. And I found out that I enjoyed it. Yeah, I really did like it. It was the fastest 2 days. It was like, man, I think I can swing this. You know, it's a big leap from shooting a video to making a movie, but
so what's the one you're making?
It's about a young man named Antoine Fisher, who has a remarkable story, and I don't want to say too much about it, but it's a really remarkable story.
But have you cast it? I mean,
no. We just started. We started looking now here in New York, because we need a young man, 18, 19 years old.
Would you appear in it?
The studio would like me to.
I'm sure they would.
To play his psychologist, but I'm looking around first.
Let me go back to Hurricane for a second. You start with the idea that you're going to, so you got this part. Everybody signed on, you're signed on, you're going to do it. Do you start with research, or do you start with what? I mean,
started with the books.
You do? You
start with the books, go back again. You start with the script. Well, I started with the books, but 3 years ago when I got the script, then it became, all right, how are we going to, what about this? So, just breaking it down. This doesn't make sense. If he did this, then why is this here? Yeah. I'm like the logic monster. Yeah. Or as Alan Pakula used to say, with have a good BS detector.
Yeah, right.
So I'm the logic monster.
That's all about motivation. Does this fit, and does this work?
Yeah, and just getting down in there and in there and in there and digging and digging. Meanwhile, I'm learning to box.
Did that come from somebody? I mean, is that instinctive with you, or did that come from training? And the guy out at American Conservatory said,
I think
just
it's training.
And dig. And
yeah,
dig.
I think it's training.
Yeah.
I think the training helps you to tap into something that you'd like to do anyway. You know what I mean? I didn't know how to apply that necessarily to acting until the training. But like I said, I used to like doing book reports and stuff, so I liked digging anyway, and I'd studied journalism. I guess I had a desire, you know, curious.
And so that's parallel with getting in physical shape.
Right.
Yeah. Because you had to use that body double for that shower scene, right?
What shower scene?
In Hurricane. Wasn't there something?
You mean when we were
standing in the shower?
When we were all naked before the interview? No, that was me.
No, I was kidding.
That was my butt, man. Working too hard. That was my onion. But you know, you had to go there.
Yeah.
That was a liberating experience, and it also said to me and to the cast, I'm willing to do what it takes.
Right.
You know. No, it's not going to be any doubles. It's going to be me.
I know, I was kidding. Yeah. But you prepared to do that and said the physical stuff was, in this kind of role, the physical stuff is parallel to whatever the mental stuff is, too.
Yeah, that was
it almost infuses the role. If you're talking about an athlete,
you better become one.
Well, exactly. And the physical part infuses how you think and how you approach it.
And so many things that I learned being in the gym. You know, the way they think and the way they move and the way you shake hands because you don't want to hurt your hands and all kinds of things that you just learn from being around the guys and, well, in these days, the women that work out in the gym. There's some tough people. Yeah. You know, I remember getting in the ring and I was talking with one guy and we were talking some stuff. He said, Denzel, don't get it confused. This is my livelihood. You're talking about taking food off my daughter's plate. And he said that and he had a look in his eye. I was like, you know, maybe I need to go over there and hit the speed back instead. Because he wasn't giving up anything.
But did you take, because you mentioned the fact that Michael Spinks said, you know, you get the headaches, you know, then you just get used to it. I got a little slow there
for a second.
You did?
Yeah.
So you felt what it's like?
Just slightly. I just, you know, like, huh? You know, that kind of thing, you know, just a little, you're giving each other concussions.
Yeah, but does it feel good to hit, too? No?
Yes.
It does.
It does. It does. You know, and just to engage, it's just to be there, you know, and everything you know from the other man's eyes. And good boxers get good at. Ali was probably the greatest at it, not giving away his pain. You know, not letting you know how much you may have hurt him. And some guys give it away, and you see it in there. Because no matter how tired you are, when you get a good shot off, you get this adrenaline rush, and suddenly you got a lot more energy. You know, you can keep going.
What was the hardest thing about this role?
Putting it down. Almost done. I'm still wrestling with it.
What do you mean?
Well, because, you know, the Academy Awards, it still has a life. Yeah. You know, we going around the world with the promotion of it, Germany and the UK and France and Japan, and so its last day really for me was probably going to be around the end of March. You know, after the awards and all of that, then I think I'll be able to set them down.
What will an Oscar mean for you?
36 years, you know, it's been since an African American has won, and for Best Actor. Sidney Poitier. It was 36 years since an African American won the Golden Globe for Best Actor.
Which you won.
Which I won. Never has an African American won both, supporting and Best Actor, which is a possibility, we'll see. And I don't think any African American has been nominated 4 times an actor.
2 for Best Actor, 2 for supporting.
Best Actor, 2
you
for
won for supporting.
1 for supporting. And I'm presenting this award to Sidney Poitier, the Screen Actors Guild Awards, this year. So I found, this is interesting. It's interesting how it's all coming together this year. We'll see what happens.
There's part of you say, I'm part of something that's Paul Robeson, Sidney Poitier. and others, and me now. You know, and because of that continuum, I gotta maintain a standard. I gotta stand for the same things they stood for. I've got to have a certain.
I don't know everything they stood for.
I got to be them.
But I
don't mean the politics.
Yeah,
I
maintain a standard as far as my work.
About excellence.
Yeah,
I don't mean
I have to
politics.
maintain a standard about my work. You know, when I was in college, up the street, the first two major acting roles I played were the two main acting roles of Robeson's career. Yeah. Eugene O'Neill's The Emperor Jones. That's the first play I ever did. I played the lead. Yeah. And then Othello. When I did Othello, there was an English teacher there by the name of Bob Stone, who came out of retirement to play Brabantio, which is Desdemona's father. Well, Bob Stone was in Othello with Paul Robeson. Yeah. And he was very instrumental and complimentary, and he's a very large part of the reason that I'm here now, just the guidance and sort of shoring me up and giving me confidence in my ability. At that young age, he saw something in me, and he expressed it, and you know, it gave me the fuel. It's like, okay, yeah, I can do this.
You do feel a responsibility as a role model.
I feel a responsibility as a human being. I don't know about, you know, this role model stuff is tossed around. You know, who's the role model? Who's the hero? Who's the genius? Who, you know, it's semantics. I mean, what are you doing for others? What have you done for someone today? You know,
how good are you to your kids? How much time do you spend?
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Are you there
know?
for?
Are you there? You know, it's like I always said. You know, yeah, they say, "Oh, Muhammad Ali was a role model." I was like, well, I couldn't get him on the phone. You know, he couldn't answer any questions for me when I needed him. You know, what would Muhammad do in this situation? Yeah. You have heroes. You know, and maybe I'm a hero to some. You know, young people or whatever.
Well, I'll tell you what it is. In part, though, it is that. I think it's especially be for what Sydney did and what you do. It is, I think, for young African Americans, says, I can go as far as my talent.
And I believe that.
It says that, and the Oscars says that, and the respect of your peers says that. You know, here's a guy who can play and he can do anything. Yeah. He's as good as there is. Yeah. I can be as good as there is. Yeah. Nobody will stop me.
See, Sydney is just such a class individual. You know, you know, we have parallels in acting, but you know, I'm just different than, you know, I dress like a bum all the time. He's always just impeccable, and the voice is right, and everything is, he
makes you crazy, doesn't it?
Yeah, he has the gait and power of a Nelson Mandela, you know, he's a statesman in a sense to me. I had the opportunity the other day at the UN, we screened Hurricane, and I met Kofi Annan. And he's just regal. You can just feel it, you know. And I'm, you know, I'm a little rough around the edges, I guess.
You don't mean that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but you're happy. You're just saying that's the way I am. It's
yeah,
not that you're saying,
I'm happy. I like my sneakers.
Yeah, you like.
Yeah, I like my sneakers.
And you like the fact that you need some buttons for your coat.
Yeah, I got to fix my coat. That's right. That's right.
Mandela. There's no more impressive man in the world today.
Great man. We met him. What a morning we spent a few years ago. We renewed, my wife and I renewed our wedding vows. Archbishop Desmond Tutu does
in South Africa.
In South Africa, and Archbishop Desmond Tutu does the renewal of the vows. We have tea with him when we leave, and we go to Mr. Mandela's house, to the whatever they call it, presidential residence. And he's a sweet man, and he was wrestling with the kids and the two babies. Our baby didn't even know who he was. I mean, there's this old guy who likes to wrestle, you know. And right away he charmed my wife. He says to her, he says, "Oh, now I see where this Denzel gets. Now I understand where the root of the power." And she's just melting. I'm going, oh, the charmer, the charm. And he's not even, oh, how you doing? How are you, Denzel? It's nice to see you. But you, now I understand. Yeah, boy. And it was just a beautiful day. And we talked to him every now and then. This man, not this year, but 99, January 1st, 1999, the first call we get, 6 o'clock in the morning, was from Nelson Mandela to wish us a happy new year.
At what time?
You know, whatever, first thing in the morning. It's 5:30, 6 in the morning. He was making calls from South Africa to people.
And you get a call.
And we get a call.
Man, I'd get up for that.
From Nelson Mandela. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? And he's always saying, when are you going to come back? And, you know, I'm like, anything you say, Mr. Mandela, anything you say.
You do an impression of him.
Do I?
Yeah, you do. No, do you do?
Oh,
you do.
No.
You do.
I do.
Yeah.
You mean I have done?
Yes.
I will do.
You have done.
Okay. How was I?
Come on, don't you have some of the, yeah.
No, I don't do an impression. I probably do. You know, my wife will say this all the time. She says, you know, whoever you're around, you start talking like that.
You do. He has such a bearing.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's a very distinct sense of the way he is.
I just remember that day. Oh, now I can see. And he kept saying, yes, yes.
That's right. That's it.
Yeah, yes. Great man. Great man.
Yeah. Had he seen Cry Freedom? Stories?
Yes,
Steve Biko. Is it Steve Biko?
He'd seen it in prison, yeah.
He saw it in prison?
He saw it in prison, yeah. Or, yeah.
Well, he had to.
Around that,
because he was still in prison.
Yeah, and his second in command, one of his deputies, Ahmed Kathrada, who did about 20 years with him, he gave us a personal tour of Robben Island. And we flew over with Ahmed, and I took my oldest son and daughter, and I had my son shoot the film, you know, make a little documentary, and he asked them questions and walked us all around into the cells and all.
Mandela's done amazing things. I interviewed him this summer, and I've interviewed him before for this program, for an hour on this program. And, you know, and I asked him about the fact that Colin Powell told me this story, that he was over there for the inauguration, and he saw these guys. He's sitting in the front row, and Mandela waves to him before he makes his speech, and they were his jailers.
Is that right?
He had invited the jailer to come, and after he became president, he invited the wives, I mean the former prime ministers, come to the presidential, and they came, reaching out to sort of bridge the gap and the scars, and because they had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission underway with Bishop Tutu. That's where they found out what really happened to Biko at that time, as you know. And this is amazing to me, the power. One of the worst, and I've forgotten which one it was. It wasn't de Klerk, it was my predecessor. It was the staunchest enforcer of apartheid, dead. His widow couldn't come for some reason. Mandela went to see her, just to reach out, you know, to understand that it's more powerful for me to take this opportunity because of the power I have now to heal.
That's the theme of the hurricane. Hate puts you in prison. Love's gonna bust you out. Love frees you. Yes, he could absolutely feel this way about all of those people, and anyone could argue, you know, that he has the right to feel this way. But he chose to feel this way, to reach out, to go to their house, to extend himself. You know, to change them, because they still are going to affect people. They still have granddaughters and grandsons and children, and everybody's watching. And if the man at the top of the chain in that country can make this type of gesture, then how does it trickle down? He had a great quote in his book, Long Walk to Freedom, that I believe, I may be wrong, but I believe he got from the chief, the tribal chief that he grew up in. I forgot where he got it from, but it said, a leader, like a shepherd, sends the fast, nimble sheep out front so that the rest will follow, not realizing they're all being led from behind. The shepherd is leading, but the shepherd doesn't have to go out front. He said, send the fast one. Send the one that they like. Send the handsome sheep. You know, the quick, smooth, suave sheep. Send them out front. And the rest will follow that one, not realizing they're all being led. So he has an understanding, an absolute understanding of leadership, and a quiet understanding. He will listen.
Yeah. He also said to me, the first 10 years, like Reuben Carter, he just hated. Hated the fact that he was there, that his youth was being taken away from him. And then at some point, it's ruining me.
That's right.
It's killing me.
That's right.
Carter, when did that happen to Reuben Hurricane Carter?
I think sometime after his second trial. He had a lot of hate in him. He was a rough character. You know, he he was rough. He was a mean, rough individual, a knockout artist, you know, and I think he carried that through his first 10 or so years in prison. And they put him back in prison until he came, and all those people who were around him, who supported him publicly and otherwise, seemed to fade away one after another. It's
I know,
over.
it's like they grew tired of it.
Yeah, the fight's over. He can't win.
Yeah.
And it took all of that for him to get to himself and to get to another place, a place of love. I personally think and it's like I said to him, I said, you know, you got what you deserve. This is what you needed to make your transition in life.
You needed what?
This confinement, this restriction.
You had so much hate from wherever.
For whatever, yeah. And it's not
Patterson.
just the evil cops or the evil
right.
system, you know. Ruben wasn't an angel by any stretch of the
Well, he'd
imagination.
been in prison before, hadn't he?
Yeah. He grew up in prison.
Yeah. Roll tape. This is where you, first time that this young man, Lesra, played brilliantly by Vasella's Rion Shannon. Am I saying that right?
Mm-hmm.
Roll tape that comes to visit you in prison.
Doors opening of the light outside. Of you. Me. Mr. Carter, understand? Don't call me Mr. Carter. Call me Rube. Rube? Rube.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
What is the obligation here in terms of the real story of Reuben Hurricane Carter? You know, what role did the Canadians play? What role the creating a fictitious character who's an evil detective, you know, who had a vendetta against racial vendetta against Reuben Carter? Did any of that cause you any concerns as you're making this movie? Did there were other things that caused you concern to say, you know, this is not Reuben Hurricane Carter, or gee, this is going a little bit too far in terms of the artistic license we have?
I didn't think of it so much in terms of the artistic license. I was sort of lobbying for, let's show his violent side a little more and not make him so sweet. You know, the problem had as much to do with time as, you know, what do you pick?
Yeah.
There was a ton of stuff. See, it's hard enough, like in Malcolm X, it's the story of Malcolm X. You know, our film is 2 stories. You know, it's really 2 movies. But we only have 1 movie's amount of time
2 hours and 20
to tell,
minutes.
to tell the story, you know. So it was very difficult as to what was going to be compromised. And, you know, there were between 9 and 13 Canadians, actually, not 3.
So,
and yes, we could have had all 13 there.
Every movie uses composite characters.
Yeah, exactly.
But is the complaint that some write, the journalistic complaint, is that there were a lot of journalists and others, you know, who made a real effort to, on behalf of Reuben Carter, and there's little notice. It's almost as if the Canadians get all the. I don't mean this in terms of Canada.
You mean people are like saying, "Oh, I should be recognized more.
Yeah,
I should be in the movie."
Yeah, some are saying. No, I think some are saying no. Some who wrote about it are saying there were other people who played a role. Others.
Well,
who
there are
argued.
a lot of people who played a role. There are a lot of writers. There are a lot of lawyers. There are a lot of people that played a role. But you got to pick, you know. Or maybe they should have done a crawl at the end and gave all the people credit, you know. I look at it like this. Here's the guy. Here's these people. This is what they came up with. So this is their point of view. I don't know how many of these folk who have written these things or whatever were involved or asked to be involved or wanted to be involved when it came time to make the picture. You know, for me, with the research that I did, and I'm looking more at the character, the thing that I got was that maybe we need to see more of his darker side, and I seen it. I don't say I was alone on that, but I just felt that would have made it a little more well-rounded. As for who else should get credit, you know, I had a hard enough
credit is
time.
a wrong word, but I mean, you know, it's just the notion. This is a complex story.
Yeah, very.
You know, and you got to make it. And you know, and I'm constantly, when you make either documentaries or the kind of stuff I even do, people are saying you got to make sure you tell the story in a way that it's comprehensible within the time. You can't have a zillion characters. People lose their way, you'll lose the sense of what is your central story. Your central story here is the redemption of Reuben Carter.
And it's people reaching out to help, not knowing what the result of that could be. These Canadians reaching out to help this young kid. You know, if you know, one could argue that Lesra got him out of jail. Lesra was the one that woke him up again.
Yeah.
When he was sort of...
He was deep into his hate.
Deep into, yeah, and into just assuming that he was going to be in prison the rest of his life. And you know, I think a lot of the energy that Ruben got, that he talks about, that he talked to me about,
well,
that energy he got from this young man, this innocent. You know, there were many lawyers, many journalists, many others who he had dealt with along those 15, 20 years.
That's a central point. If Ruben thinks that this young man...
Good enough for him, good enough for me.
You bet. If he says this is the guy that did it for me, it doesn't matter.
Right.
You know? Right. One thing I was struck by knowing about you is that you... How many times did your dad, who was a preacher, I think your parents split when you were about 4?
14.
14. Mm-hmm. How many times did you ever throw a ball with you?
I remember once.
I do. I don't remember a single time. I love my dad more than you can imagine.
Only once.
But the one thing I miss, and the one thing I wish I could do, I wish I had a son that I could hit tennis balls with or shoot with.
Yeah.
You know.
I do that with mine. I remember once, and I remember it because I went, man, he can't throw. Yeah. He just looked so hard. That's why I remember. We were in the field in Virginia, and he threw the ball at me. I was like, ooh, that was ugly, Dad.
You also have a wonderful thing, I think, is that Pauletta's family comes out and talks about history and storytelling and the book of Proverbs.
Unfortunately, she's lost both her parents. In the last year, she lost both parents. So their grandkids, our children, have lost a lot, but they got a lot because they put a foundation in them. Her father used to always sit down with them and teach from the book of Proverbs. He lived his life based on the book of Proverbs. A very, very special, outstanding man, and her mother too, and she's still struggling with that.
Their grandparents actually worked with Dean Acheson, who was a very famous Secretary of State for Harry Truman. One of the great Secretaries of State history of American foreign policy.
That's right. Her grandfather, John, and grandmother, Kate, ran Acheson's house.
Yeah.
Backstage, was it backstairs at the White
House? At the Acheson place.
At the Acheson place.
Good luck.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here. I hope you'll come do it again, and I may see you again at the takeout counter.
At the takeout counter at Mr. Childs. That's right. That's right. Thanks.
Denzel Washington for The Hour, nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actor for his performance in Hurricane. Thank you for joining us for The Hour.